Thank you for participating in today's meeting. Please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. Click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you are in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide it to a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items, and times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Word time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you are authorizing recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to our Local Government and Small Business Assistance Advisory Group meeting for Friday, August 9th, 2024. And we'll go ahead and do our roll call, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please state your location if you don't agree. Felipe Aguirre, absent. Rachel Arizmendi, absent. Paul Avila,
Present.
Jeff Blake, absent. Todd Campbell, absent. Levon Daniel,
Here.
John DeWitt, absent. Bill Lamar, Bill Lamar.
Lamar here.
Thank you. Rita Loof,
Present.
Eddie Marquez, absent. David Rothbart, absent. Mayor Stewart, absent. Vice Mayor Bui, absent. Mayor Salache is absent. Mayor Locke Dawson is absent. Supervisor Hagman is absent. And Chair Rodriguez.
Here.
We do not have a quorum.
Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and proceed as best we can today, absent a quorum. And so that I'm clear, the number of members today are totaling 5.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor Rodriguez. May I ask clarification on what the number for a
You want to go ahead and put on your mic?
required quorum?
I believe it's 9. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're short. Vice. Okay. Well, we can't approve the minutes, so we'll table that from 2. And we did have 2 discussion items for today. So we'll start with item 3 in regards to any follow-up actions to report.
Hi, this is Lisa Tanaka, Assistant Deputy for Legislative and Public Affairs. I apologize, Derek is out ill. So there, as I understand it, there were no follow-up or action items, and that takes care of item number 3.
For item 4, we had an overview of Rule 317.1, Clean Air Act non-attainment fees for the 8-hour ozone standards and potential fee equivalency. And we had a overview by staff.
Great. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate the intro there. My name is Mike Kraus. I'm an Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in our Planning and Rules Division. Luckily, this is not an item that needs a vote. So I'm going to present you the overview of our rule that our board just recently passed. And again, it's 317.1. Okay, so we'll get the first slide, please. All right, this all started back back in the I believe it was 1990 when the Clean Air Act established a section in there that said that if an area is deemed non-attainment and they make that finding of non-attainment with a certain standard, in this case we're discussing ozone standards, that a penalty fee basically is imposed on large sources in that region contributing to those non-attainment status. And so in this particular case, again, the Clean Air Act has this, and we basically codified this within our rules to implement. And so how it works is that, as you look on the table on the right there, we do have a couple standards. As you know, we have 3 8-hour ozone standards. It kind of breaks down to very simply to like a certain parts per billion level that it's allowable for our region to be at. And so it started out with an 80 ppb, then it was ratcheted down in 1997 to a 75 ppb. I'm sorry, that was the 1997, and then it was ratcheted down in 2008 to a 75 ppb. And there was actually a third one that we're not addressing in this rule, but there's a third one in 2015 that ratchets our region down to 70. We've not met any of those standards yet. And so this is what causes us to have to establish this fee requirement. Now, mind you, if we do not establish the fee requirement, the EPA can step in and they will implement it themselves and basically reclaim those fees for themselves. Next slide, please. So what are we talking about when we're talking about complying with this particular section? So it's interesting. There was initially, when this first came about during the 1-hour ozone standard, we were able to take advantage of something called the fee equivalency. It basically allowed us to take any surplus funds that we would have that puts them toward emission reduction type projects. In this case, we used a lot of those funds that we were able to garner toward mobile sources and trucks and school buses and things like that. And we're able to basically equivocate the amount of emission reductions and apply those to what we would have charged some of the large sources. Unfortunately, that approach we're not able to take advantage of that approach as we move forward. So that leaves us only one pathway, which is what's considered the fee collection. And I'll kind of walk through how that kind of works on that. So, and again, this applies again to these two upcoming standards. Next slide, please. Overall, we have been doing pretty well on trying to tackle our ozone issues here in the region, as you can see here with this graph. Unfortunately, however, we still have not met the mark. So as you can see here on this graph, those 3 black dashed lines down there, those are those 3 standards I just mentioned, the 3-hour, 8-hour ozone standards. But as you can see, with the red and the blue, both in our South Coast Air Basin as well as Coachella Valley, have not yet met there. So again, there's still some work to be done. Next slide, please. Okay, so with regards to contributions, as we all know, ozone is a mixture of both volatile organic compounds as well as nitrogen oxides. And when those two pollutants meet in the air and it gets in contact with sunlight and warmth, etc., the photochemical reaction occurs and ozone is created. So we are tackling both the VOC emissions and NOx, and so does the act under this penalty fee. So it does require those, again, major sources. Major sources, by the way, are greater than 10 tons a year of contributions from facilities. If that facility emits more than that, either under VOC or under NOx, the fee applies to both. They would then have to pay that fee in the future years. This kind of breaks down where our contributions are at, just so you kind of know where that's all coming from. And of course, the blue is our primary, are the sources that we regulate. Okay, next slide, please. So as I said, when we developed this rule, it was applicable to the 2 8-hour ozone standards, and again, to major sources greater than 10 tons. Our estimate for those, yes.
Say questions, Mike. With all this heavy construction going around in Inland Empire, big trucks, diesels, now, would that be category wise, where would that fit? That's not, is that temporary? Because some of those construction programs are going to
Right.
go on for 10 years. As far as, let's build a tract of houses and we're out of there in a year.
Right.
How is that classified?
So, that's not captured under this. This is actually the operations of facilities when they're up and running and what they contribute from their operations, right? However, construction emissions are required to be analyzed under the umbrella of the California Environmental Quality Act and CEQA and that process. So those should be accounted for projects as they get for local approvals. Okay, with regards to the fee, like I said, this fee obligation. So basically how it works is, and the way the act sort of lays it out for us, it's, again, this is all very pre-prescribed from EPA, how this works. But basically, facilities will look at their emissions in the same year that we're supposed to be in attainment. So in the first standard addressing here, we should be in attainment come the year 2024, this year. So we will look at facilities emissions of this year and can categorize those as a base year. Nothing happens yet. Next year, we then take another look at their emissions for the following year, so in 2025, and we compare those to the emissions from the base year. Okay? What the Act requires us to do is to apply a penalty fee for any emissions that are above 80% of that baseline year. So if a facility by chance reduces down to that over that year, then there's no fee. But whatever that excess is, and I believe you have an example that I'll show you here in a moment. But you would apply then that, and it'd be so many dollars per ton. Now, the Clean Air Act back in 1990 established that fee at $5,000. But then the EPA then ratchets it every year under CPI, and now it's at this amount that you see here, close to about $12,000 per ton. Next slide, please. So this is the example I wanted to show you guys. So like to put it in some numerical numbers here, so you can see how in the orange, that's the baseline year. No fee is assessed at that point. The first year that then the fee would be assessed would be in 2025. And again, looking at that yellow line, that's where the 80% is. Anything above that line in the amount of tons, in this case, it's 4 tons, times it by approximately 12,000 to kind of give you a ballpark figure about a facility in this example would pay 48,000 on that given year. And then it would apply again. You would redo that calculation again in the following year until the area meets attainment. This would then continue on. But as you can see here, this would be an example that is one that happens to ratchet down in the following year, get it down below the 80%, then no fee is applied. Okay, next slide, please. So a question came up about, wow, that seems so prescriptive, seems so fixed on the baseline year being this, again, in this case 2024, this particular year. And EPA has had guidance before in the past of what they call an alternative baseline approach or option. So basically the idea is that if a facility doesn't believe that 2024 is a representative year, one way or the other, of those emissions, there is an option to do a look back at over their last 10 years of emissions and can pick 2 consecutive years and average those and make that the representative emissions for their baseline. And so we applied that in our rule ourselves. Okay. We did ask EPA, by the way, for that guidance specifically, and they said, well, think about it. We might come out with something specific, but we decided to move ahead with it because the stakeholders were interested in that, and they were really concerned about being, so pigeonholed in that one with that 1 year. There's also an exclusion plan. So another issue that some of the stakeholders raised was that while this applies to facilities that are emitting greater than 10 tons a year, sometimes they're also not emitting at 10 tons a year, but they might have a permit or maybe in the Title V program, which kind of defines those facilities as being greater than 10 tons. But in actuality, they may actually be operating at less than that. And so we've given them a pathway forward to come to us and provide that exclusion plan. Yes. Oh, what, you can't hear me or? Oh, you're good. You're good. Jason, did you want to say? I don't know who I'm looking at. The slide. Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Michael?
Yes.
Hi, Mike, it's Bill Lamar.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah. Couple of questions. Going back to your slide 7. So 2025 is the first year that these 320 odd facilities would have to pay these Section 185 fees. or is it 2026?
Good question, Bill. Thank you for that. Thank you for highlighting. Yeah, so procedurally, the way it will work again is we look at the emissions from 2024 and then compare those to the 2025. Realistically, this won't be happening until about the spring of the year 2026, and then we would have to, send out invoices for those, and then folks can, submit their payment for that. Some of the stakeholders did raise this concern about that first year payment because they don't know potentially what that will look like and what that will be, and so businesses were asking us to give them some relief on that, so they could put it into their budgets and things like that. They can get the numbers. They can again, put in their budget to do whatever they need to do. So for the first year, we're actually going to allow 1 year to pay the invoice for that initial year. And that'll shorten in the future years when they get a sense of what that fee might look like for them.
Okay, so then facilities will be 1 year in arrears then for some period of time on their fees, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then my other question is on this alternative baseline. These 10 years that you could look back, are these selective years or are these consecutive years? Let's say that I want to look back at 2004 and 5 for 5 and 6, for instance. Is it those 2 years, or is it from there forward?
So thank you for the question, Bill. So it's 10 years from the attainment year. So it would only go back to 2014 in the case of this 2024 baseline. And then what you do is you can look back up to 2014. I'm sorry. 2014, and then you can pull any 2 consecutive years and average those. So it can be 2014, 2015, 2015, 2016, 2016, 2017. I think you get the gist.
Okay.
Okay.
I got you. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, Rita.
Question.
Sure.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. So I had a question on slide 7 and on slide 9. So on slide 7, with the scenario of the 20 tons per year that you have in the middle, you have a fee of $48,000. That's per year per facility.
For this example, yes.
Okay. And then I thought there was some calculation as well, depending on the different standards. So you have here the 1997 ozone standard, but then the failure to attain the other standards is, so is this 48,000 times 2 multiplied by the number of failure or years where the standard has not been met? Is that the way it's calculated?
In the future, I'll take a step back. So this example we're showing here is for the 1997 standard because the attainment year is 2024. But the other standard that you're mentioning, the 2008 standard, that attainment year isn't until 2032.
I see.
So
at that point.
At that point,
is
yes.
when
And if we're not in attainment for that first one, yes, there would be an overlap.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on slide 9, and I really appreciate the inclusion of an exclusion plan. Is that the only way a facility can get out of the fee? In other words, is it a mandatory plan, or can the facility come to their own conclusion that they're not going to be in the program and go that route? How does it work?
Yeah, another great question. So EPA requires us to make sure that if we were to have people excluded, it needs to be done as an enforceable method. So from this point, at this point in time, we're only seeing really the permit as the best enforceable method route to be excluded.
But is the exclusion plan in addition to the permit? In other words, is there a plan fee that you're assessing when the facility files?
Yes.
Okay. All
the
right.
process, yes.
Do you know what the fee is?
Yes, I happen to have it right here. I put it.
Jason,
It is.
Thank you.
If you are a Title V facility, it's $259.66. 207.19 for non-Title V facilities.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
It's a quick follow-up on the previous baseline slide.
Sure.
So if you're a qualifying facility,
Mhm.
can you walk through the baseline step? Is it establish a baseline this year? And then compare it to whether or not it's 80% of that next year?
Correct. So in the spring of this upcoming spring, we'll be looking at everyone's 2024 emissions, and then the spring of 2026, we'll be looking at the emissions from
So this spring,
2025. In the
we'll
spring of
establish the
2026.
baseline.
Yes.
And then the following
And
year,
the following year, we'll
the facility would need to be 80% of that.
Right.
Otherwise, the fee would be paid.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Alrighty. Okay, next slide, Guy, would be great. So another question that was raised was, we have a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about the overall, fee collection. So we did some estimate numbers. Obviously, we don't have, it's not definitive yet because we haven't finished the year of emissions, nor do we know what 2025 is going to look like. But if we did the example of what we believe of all those Title V facilities, for example, didn't take an exclusion approach or pathway, so they were all impacted by it, and they didn't change their emissions from what they've done in the previous years, we estimate it could be around 26 million for that. And again, we would anticipate that would go down over time, as people do fall subject to various rules that we have. We'll put controls on there, et cetera. We do anticipate that those emissions will go down, and so would the fee being collected. Yes.
Question, Mike.
Sure.
Let's say I'm a manufacturer here in this region. I'm already on AQMD's radar screen, okay? And let's say I'm doing real well, but I have a couple of off years for whatever reason. The market shifted. I couldn't get the secondary chain products, whatever it is. Now, on your exclusion plan, is there language to address that? We had a bad year. I had to lay off 20 people or 40 people, whatever the case is. Would that be taken into consideration when the fees are laid out?
Would you envision the exclusion plan to look like?
Yeah, we do detail this out in the staff report because we do look at the annual emission reports. But what we have made that consistent with is our Title V exclusion process, which looks at the past 5 years of have you been consistently below the 80% of that threshold for those 5 years. And then we would process that exclusion plan to get out of the requirements.
Sure.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, Rita.
Yes, thank you. While we're on that slide, so I recall from the staff report, there's about 300 impacted facilities for 317.1. So if you're projecting revenue from the fees for 26 million, doing rough math on the average is $86,000 per facility. And is the district going to prepare an invoice for those facilities? How is that going to work out? Or are they going to have to figure out what their fee obligation is?
No, we will do we will do the calculations. Actually, we just met this week, actually. By the way, this is Dr. Kalam Chung. I don't know if you guys know her, but she's one of our planning and rules managers. I worked on this project, so I don't know why I'm doing the speaking. Anyway, yeah, so we're coming up with a program. Because I know there's a lot of little details that we're not getting into today, but what goes in, what goes out, who becomes applicable. We'll get the word out there who's subject into the rule, as well as then doing the calculations and the invoices and all of that will be all done in-house. Yes.
And just a quick follow-up on that. Will you publish the amounts that the facilities owe the district as far as, how it's
Publicly,
breaking
you
down?
mean?
Right, like the AER inventory type of information.
We typically do not.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if it falls under like public records request, but I wouldn't, I would think there's some level of
Okay.
confidentiality there. Yeah. Great. And then the last bullet actually was on here.
Sorry,
Just-
Levon,
Oh,
I
no
have a
problem. Hi.
question too.
Sure.
Same kind of question related to the baseline. I assume that you're taking into consideration business growth when you look at the baseline and compare one year to another? Like if
Well,
if a company has significant growth and they're adding expansion that is contributing to the emissions,
Yeah.
they're going to maybe not have that decrease that you're looking for, but there's a valid reason for it. And they may put controls in place and reduce percentage-wise their emissions, but
Right.
if they've had significant growth, you may not have a net decrease.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the act is pretty prescriptive on what that structure looks like, you know, holding you to that orange bar for the attainment and then doing that future comparison. So, I mean, the only encouragement we would say is like when in that midst of doing the growth, you know, seek out those cleaner technologies to make that, you know, make your business successful, but yet cleaner to kind of avoid those penalty fees as much as possible. Okay, and then Rita, your point that you made earlier is there on the last bullet point that things could change come 2033. Yeah.
Yes, I saw that, but not for the better.
Right, exactly.
So on the initial year fee obligation, assuming the facility's emissions don't go down and they stay stagnant, in 2026, will they pay the same fee? So it's a yearly fee?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the facility that's paying $86,000 in 2025, if their emissions remain constant, they will be paying again the same, they'll have the same fee obligation in 2026 and thereafter.
Oh, good point. Yeah, so the act also, or the EPA also increases the amount of that fee by CPI. So it could, yeah. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, no, not, fortunately, we're not in control of that. Okay, next slide, please.
Michael?
Do we have another? Did you have another question? Oh, okay, no worries. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Just to elaborate a little on Levon's comment, I don't see the emissions going down for a variety of reasons. One is business expansion or new business coming in. The other is population growth, and the other, and probably the most important one, is that the reason for our non-attainment is not these 320 odd facilities or any of those for that matter. It's federal sources and state sources. So these Section 185 fees are really fees in perpetuity fees, because they're not going to go down, and a business's emissions aren't going to necessarily stay constant, unless unless they take a cap, and that means that they're not going to grow at all. In fact, if you keep wanting to, there's a point where the emissions from any facility, where they reach where it no longer is a profitable business. You can just reduce so much, given whatever technology, whether it's known technology or black box technology. I mean, it's you're going to have some type of some form of emissions, making whatever it is that you make. So if emissions go down at all by stationary sources, they're going to come down from businesses who are just forced to close because they're no longer a profitable business in this region.
Thank you for those points there, Bill. It's well taken. Yeah, so I mean, mobile sources is also a problem in our region as well. I mean, again, the act is pretty prescriptive with regards to those major sources. Again, it's a major source here we're talking about, greater than 10 tons per year. So these are the large sources and they are the stationary ones. So. Okay, on this next slide here, we try to break it out if anyone's interested in where we think that those Title V are basically large major sources, where those sectors are at, as you can see there, majority coming from the refineries, and there's others. So just for informational purposes. Next slide, please. We did want to add something. We added something new here for you guys with regards to what we thought you might be interested in with regards to impacts to local governments and small businesses. So as you can see here, depending upon how you define your small business, whether that's using our definition we have in 102, in accordance with that definition, none of the facilities look to be impacted. But if we follow the definition of what our small business assistance office has, it would be about 39 of those. To give you another sort of context to that, however, we noticed that of those 39, about only 7 of those were looking to be above 8 tons per year. So we do think there's an opportunity there that those other remaining folks could apply for that exclusion plan and be out from the fee. So just an FYI. On the local government side, you can see here we broke it out between like things like utilities and hospitals, state government, et cetera, and those various numbers of facilities and the percentages of our total that we see being impacted by the rule. Okay, next.
Just to
Sure.
pause for a second. So the top part of that slide is indicating there's 39 that are identified as through the Small Business Assistance Office. So they're Title V. I'm just trying to get that distinction of those 39 and how they're distinguishable amongst the Title V. What makes them distinct amongst these 39 as far as the criteria that you denoted them?
Yeah. So first off, there's 2 different definitions of a small business. Like the number of employees, the amount of income, those sorts of things. And it's different in our Rule 102 than what our Small Business Assistance Office defines as a small business. So depending upon which definition you use would depend upon how many the numbers of facilities are impacted. But with regards to 39, yes, those are small businesses, but they're emitting greater than 10 tons per year.
There are businesses with an annual receipt of 5 million or less, or with 100 or fewer employees.
Correct. So the first bullet is the Rule 102 definition, and the second one is our small business assistance definition of a small business. So obviously, a higher amount of annual income then brings in some more of those facilities.
Do you have anything you'd like to highlight regarding the waste management and remediation services comments that were made during the hearings to share?
Yeah, no, and they raise a valid point when you're dealing with like municipal type services, right? There's not much they could do when it comes to servicing the population, and it's something Bill just noted himself. I would just add, though, however, that these facilities also have opportunities too, and we've seen it already. When you talk to David, it's a shame he's not here, but there's projects that they do work on. They're long range projects, but they are projects they work on to move to cleaner technologies, or in the case of a lot of the landfill ones, to look at beneficial use of the gas. So there are opportunities out there. Yeah.
You're just touching what I was going to ask you. Is the existing facility, let's say an existing facility, and the technology is 20 years old or 30 years old, and it has to be replaced. Are there new technologies that, let's say, AQMD would not underwrite, but at the same time introduce to the current facility? Okay, let's get rid of the smokestack and put in a little smokestack, for lack of a better term, lack of better terms.
Sure.
And see if that'll work. Is there something like that on the drawing board?
Yeah. So, just in general, our agency, as we look at all sources and we have over 400 rules, on the books dealing with all sorts of different sources and best ways that we can move forward in the future with this technology. But we also have things when people come in, so that we typically analyze those on what we call BARC, so the best available retrofit control technology, and try to move folks in a cleaner direction that way. But another way is when they come in for their permits and they're doing, they're maybe modifying a permit, or maybe it's a new place, what have you. Engineers will look at what's called the best available control technology and move those facilities forward in that direction. So, yeah. And we actually we just got off the phone this morning with CARB. We were looking to have a joint symposium with them on zero technology. Yep. And see, Rita's clapping for those that are on the hybrid. Yeah.
I'm
And
assuming stationary sources will also be part of that.
yep,
So
yep, absolutely. Yes, that's actually is the focus. Sorry, it is on the stationary. So we're hoping to start really expanding this dialogue out there, and also address like the challenges and the needs, and sometimes our inability to kind of meet that zero standard in certain applications. So it all could be on the table. We can discuss. Okay.
one more question
Yep.
on that.
Yes, Rita.
So one of the things, when I first looked at the list of affected facilities, when I was looking at the draft rule, it struck me as to how many hospitals were impacted. And you have here on your list 14 hospitals in the South Coast Basin will be impacted by this rule. So that's very concerning. And to Bill's point, at some point, a business makes a decision that it's not cost effective to operate in the area for whatever the reasons, and especially if they can't reduce their emissions and their fees are going up. So what we see happening is we see people leaving the South Coast Basin, or in some cases moving out of state. But the demand for those goods still exists. So what they're doing is they're shipping the goods in or trucking the goods in and storing them in warehouses. And then we wonder why we have a goods movement problem. So then you create more mobile source emissions. So, and I get it. I mean, this is a federal law. I know your hands are somewhat tied or very tied. But really, it's kind of counterproductive to have these policies because it's adding to the problem. It's not improving the problem. The businesses that want to remain in business are going to have to make that kind of decision. I know we've had members that have left the South Coast because it's simply not cost effective to operate. So they might go out of state and then they're shipping the goods in, and that's how they're surviving. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rita. Good points.
Before we take any more questions, I'm going to just let's get through the rest of the presentation and then we'll take the questions.
Okay, no problem. All right, next slide, please, Guy. Okay, so with regards to the implementation, we just discussed about working with our IM team on that, but as we kind of already talked about, identifying those facilities will occur in the spring of next year. Send out a notice of those folks so they know who they may be applicable then to this rule. Doing that fee determination, again, allowing certain off ramps for folks who want to take advantage of that. And then again, I was talking earlier about how we were looking to do the invoicing, at least on the first year, giving them a full year to make that happen. And then of course that time frame would shorten in the subsequent years. Next slide, please. And of course, the question then came about, well, okay, how are we going to spend those funds? So we would like a public process on this. We do want to hear everyone's, points of view on what they think. We've heard some already during the rule development, and we want to hear some more. Because there's the act does not, and EPA does not define how those monies are being spent. The only thing they did note, however, that we just can't give back the fee. So, but there's some great opportunities out there, whether these are emission reduction projects, technology demonstration projects, pilot projects, lots of things like that. So we've heard again lots of ideas, and in the near future we'll be compiling all of that and present that back to the board. Okay, and the next slide, please, is basically our staff contact. So if anyone has any further questions or think of something afterwards, you know where to find us.
Yeah, thank you. Before we take any other questions, I wanted to see, did we have David Rothbard participating from the Riverside location? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, David.
Thank you for acknowledging me. My apologies not being there in person. I had a previous commitment. But can I ask a question real quick?
The Riverside location.
No, I'm not in the Riverside location. I probably have to do public comment.
Yes, unfortunately, as much as I would like to, we have to comply with, if you're a member, you have to be at a agendized location.
Understood. So when you get the public comment after members, I'd appreciate being able to make a comment.
Will do. Thank you, David. Okay, so we'll just see if there's any other questions. Okay, Rita, go ahead.
Yes. Yes, on the expenditure of funds, I know I made these comments during the public hearing, where if we could allocate the funds to the affected facilities to the extent that we can lessen their pain, to kind of mitigate and help them maybe convert to technologies that will reduce their emissions, or any kind of mitigation to those facilities rather than those fees going into things like mobile sources. I get that the district, that's the big target, the mobile source emissions. But like I've said before, in the industry, then we seem to get all the sticks and none of the carrots because they're all going to the mobile sources. And, you know, I felt that through the rule process, even though I don't like this rule, I don't like the additional fees, we're never going to support a fee increase on businesses. You made the best out of a really bad situation. So I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Paul, go ahead.
Hey, Paul.
My kind of a front door and a back door question. Bureaucratically, on the committee that decides what happens with the spending of funds, is that the board or a separate committee? Question number one. And number two, to follow with what Rita said, let's say you have a business that's having problems. Old technology, let's say like a Farmer John, for example, except they left town and abandoned 2,000 people were out of work, but something not that big, but in that general area. Now, could those funds, whatever they might be allocated to help that business? But I don't mean economically, for technology, like another like a smokestack or cleaning up, these kind of things. And I say that is because, and you've been around here for a while, I guess the battery company's back in town, okay? And I saw that the past couple of weeks, the battery company's making waves that they want to open the doors again. Now, I like battery. I use batteries. I don't have a problem with the business. It's just what happened. So the third theoretical question is, let's say this pool of funds, if the powers that be decided, would that money could be used to go to the battery company so they could hire people and clean up their emissions? That's all.
Yeah, so again, the EPA does not direct us how we spend the funds. So there's a little bit of an open door there. But again, we would just want to make sure we're not violating the one clause they say is just giving it back. So, but I do think there's a lot of, like we do with a lot of things, you know, we spend monies on emission reduction type projects and things like that. So I think there's some opportunity there. With regards to the bureaucratic sort of process, again, we're going through a public process on this. So we do want to get the public input on that. So we'll probably have some working group meetings on it to discuss it. And of course, we'll go back to the board and see that they get their buy-in as well on how those funds will be spent. And yeah, we typically go to a committee before we go to the full board. So yeah, you bet.
Michael?
Yes,
Okay,
Bill.
is that Bill?
Yeah.
Bill, I'm going to make this the last question. Then go ahead.
Last question of the meeting. All right.
No, last question of this item.
Oh, on this item. Okay, good. Earlier on, John DeWitt sent an email out saying, apologizing for him not being able to attend, but he did offer a question, and it's a question that I have as well. He said, will the change in the Chevron protocol impact the rulemaking of the district? My question here is, 34 years ago, when the Clean Air Act amendments were introduced, one could argue that stationary sources were a much more prominent source of emissions than they are today. Today, that's been reversed considerably, and the major source of emissions are now come from sources under federal and state governments. Also back in 1990, when we were first threatened with having to pay these Section 185 fees, the district and members of the business sector, including myself, went to Washington and advocated against it. And we met with members of Congress and the White House, and they made it clear to us that it was never the intent of Congress to punish individual businesses. We even heard that from Congressman Henry Waxman, the father of the Clean Air Act and a co-author of it. So my question is, if that's all true, and in light of the recent Supreme Court ruling on Chevron, and I'm assuming at least Michael is, maybe the rest of the group isn't, ruling on Chevron, the difference, I'm sure that these 320 odd stationary sources that may have to pay these fees today would welcome EPA's decision at being reviewed by the court or a judge to see if EPA, considering that the demographics of all of this has changed so much that EPA may be overstepping their authority by imposing them these fees today in light of the change. And Michael, if you can't answer that, maybe Barbara or somebody else can.
Yeah, the only thing I could say is that, you know, once the act was approved and that provision is in the act, there's not much at this point, at least we can do to undo that unless it gets, you know, modified.
Well, I understand that, but you know, sitting back on our hands and just you know, some of us like you are preparing invoices, and then the business community waiting to receive them. You know, I think, you know, if we do nothing, nothing's going to be done except we're going to have to pay these fees. But certainly to pose this question to you know, to our you know, to your legislative consultants, certainly back in Washington, and have them ask the questions of our elected officials back there. That the landscape has changed considerably, and these fees are not $5,000 that they were 34 years ago. They're $12,000 now, and they're going to be more and more expensive. And we're also going to have two fees when the 70 parts per million comes into effect, because we'll have not only the 80, but I'm sorry, 80, but the 75 parts per million. This is just going to be a horrific problem that should be addressed certainly at this time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill. I certainly can appreciate your sentiments and concern. This is, it's been said a number of times how AQMD's hands are tied. I think even Rita said we made the best of a bad situation as her sentiments. If we didn't move forward with this as it was presented, then it would have been implemented and regardless. And the only difference is that the funds collected now will be collected at AQMD, and as far as those, how the funds will be used, that's yet to be determined. But at least we'll know, have some solace in that those funds will be invested in the district towards our mission. As to your overall comments, it's certainly organizations like yours and others that are on this advisory group. Certainly, I think maybe David will have a comment a little bit momentarily to this point. Perhaps things are being set in motion to further explore this outside of the AQMD. We're not, as far as reforming EPA, I don't think that's something that we're really keen on. We got other things that we're focusing on right now, but if a reform effort to address the concerns you've highlighted is of interest by the business community, there's certainly many avenues to do that and many ways to pursue that, including contacting members of Congress and expressing the concerns about this, and it being worthwhile to consider an EPA reform or exemption for certain, maybe amongst those that are in that local government category at a minimum.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not arguing that we should reform EPA. We can have that conversation certainly at some later date, but my question is not to, we can still begrudgingly, how many times have you begrudgingly written a check at the end of the month for something that you didn't, that you had to pay for, but you certainly didn't want to? And that's pretty much analogous of what this is. Yes, we have to pay these fees, but the district spends millions of dollars a year on lobbyists, and this is certainly something that is right in their wheelhouse, a question that they could answer or seek an answer.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Message received loud and clear on that. And appreciate the input everyone collectively here today. So thank you for the report. We'll look forward to updates in regards to the discussions on how the fees would be utilized, and at those discussions, perhaps the advisory group can be part of that as far as providing input down the road. So we do have public comment as part of this item. Oh, okay, go ahead. We have a staff
I
comment?
just had wanted to say something. I know Mr. Rothbart isn't at a notice location. I just recommend not taking any comments from him, because that's kind of going around the purpose of the Brown Act, having all the members at a notice location.
Oh. So you're advising that we not take a public comment from him because he is not at a notice location as an advisory group member?
Correct.
Okay. And so him being an advisory group member precludes him from making a public
comment as a member of the public?
Because it's basically circumventing the Brown Act if now we're going to allow advisory group members in the future to be seated somewhere that's not at a notice location and have a discussion where basically their comments may have greater weight than a general member of the public. And here we don't have a quorum today, but I just think it's bad practice to do that.
Okay, well, I'm not one to go against our legal counsel advice to just, I've seen instances where council members get out from the dais and they go and they make a public comment, but I guess they're there in the meeting, aren't they? So can't really think of an analogy that would counter what you're saying. So I'll respectfully take your advice. And David, I regret that we're not able to take your public comment, although I know you've had a lot to say and write about this, and certainly was thinking that when it was on the agenda that you would be weighing in quite a bit, but the circumstances don't allow that today. So we'll just have to hold off on that. Do we have any other public comment in the queue for this item?
May I ask a clarification question on that, Mayor Rodriguez, on the public comment?
You can go ahead and if you'd like to ask
Yes.
council about that, go right ahead.
So I can totally see the appearance of him being a member of the committee. But is there also a risk in denying a member of the public a request if he was viewed as a member of the public? Could that be then a violation of the Brown Act by not allowing a public request for comment? And so I think that's kind of tricky. So I'm not sure which is the lesser of the evils.
Yeah,
So
but the issue is he is a member of the advisory group. And also, if you think about it, then if we just start allowing all advisory group members to call wherever they want, then that kind of negates the underlying policy of the Brown Act, where all the members are supposed to be at a notice location.
Okay, Paul, go right ahead. I don't want to get this into a legal
Oh,
debate
no, this
though
is
here.
just a
So,
purely hypothetical thing. Let's say I'm on the freeway, I blow a flat tire and I'm on the side of the road and I gotta call in on a cell phone or Wi-Fi or my computer. But it's emergency. That doesn't matter, even though I'm on the board. I just want to say, I'm just curious because it might happen.
I know that for the Brown Act, and I don't want to keep getting into the depths of the Brown Act, and but I know there's some exceptions. Let's say if you're sick and there's certain emergencies and people have a vote on it, but that's a separate process. So
Just a point of clarification, even for our board members that are traveling to the meeting, and they want to take the call from their car, as they're getting to their notice location, we've had to also let them know that, no, they had to wait till they got to the notice location. So it's not, yeah. Yep.
I see Jeff, you have a comment.
Yeah, my question is, if you're able to call in as a member of the public at large, and you're allowed to ask a question at the end of the meeting in public comments, if you end up in a situation like I am a member, I am on the board, I'm a part of the panel, but if I were not able to connect, which I had a lot of difficulty today, I don't understand why, if I called in like any other attendee calling in to listen to the meeting, why at the time of public comment at the end, I would be restricted from asking any questions. It doesn't make sense logically. I'm not an attorney, but it doesn't make sense logically.
I think in this instance, it's different because you are at a notice location. You just had trouble connecting and you are providing comment later. So the difference is you're at a notice location.
That wasn't my question.
I must have misunderstood because you said you had trouble connecting and then you finally connected and you want to speak, and then you would be if you were at a notice location.
What I'm saying is, if a member of the public at large calls in as an attendee to listen to the meeting, they have the right to ask a question at the end during public comments.
Yes, that's correct. Because
Okay, so
they're a member of the public. They're not a committee member. There's a general public comment period at the end of the meeting for.
that's what I'm talking about, right? So if somebody calls in as an attendee, a member of the public at large, and wants to ask a question, why is he restricted from asking the question because he sits on the committee? It doesn't make sense. He's not calling in asking a question as a panelist. He's calling in asking the question as a public member, a member of the public at large.
Okay, I understand you disagree with my recommendation, but that is my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, it's not a legal opinion, it's your recommendation.
I'm interpreting it as a legal opinion, Jeff. I understand your point very clearly, and I'm not really going to get into any debating on what the direction is here. That's the legal direction that we're being advised, and I want to comply with legal counsel's recommendation. As much as I don't agree with the spirit of that, I understand what you're saying, but we're going to move on. Bill, if this is on this topic, I'm moving on. So do you
no, Mr. Chair,
yeah.
I don't want to argue.
Yeah, I really don't want
David. I don't want to argue David's validity, but I was looking over. I did have one last question on this topic. if you would permit me to do that, get that off. Let me finish my notes on that.
One last question, yes.
Thank you. And I'd like to know if we can kind of mentally get back on track on this on 317.1. I'd like to know why the ozone SIP agreement between EPA, CARB, and the district doesn't alleviate the need to impose Section 185 fees if Section 172 penalties are not triggered. Then Section 185 penalties shouldn't be either. Maybe Michael can answer that.
I mean, the only thing I would say is that, again, the Clean Air Act is pretty clear about non-attainment and the penalty fee for major sources, and that's just that. All the other things, I hear you. We do work things out with them and the other agencies as we kind of work through our plan and our state implementation plans, all that stuff. But that is a separate track.
Yeah, but in the settlement agreements, Michael, EPA, the district, and CARB have all said that you all are going to dialogue, or I think you all use the term work with or collaborate with, and so I mean, you know, we just keep hearing that's it, that's the law, and your hands are tied. Well, you know, obviously what you're hearing from us, you know, is the pushback you're hearing is because these fees are so onerous.
It doesn't eliminate the basin's failure to attain the 1997 ozone standard. And so that's where the 317.1 comes from. So definitely hear what you're saying. We would love that, you know, we have this, you know, great collaboration with other agencies, and we didn't have to assess these fees to the Title V facilities, but that's what the Clean Air Act says, and that's what we have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other raised hands for public comment that we can recognize? Okay, Harvey Etter, you are up.
Hello.
Hello, Harvey.
Hello. Yes. Good afternoon. Am I being heard?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm outside and there's some street noise. There's an ambulance passing. In reference to these fees and stuff, I mean, if the district don't do it, it's the law. If the district don't do it, then the feds do it. And our reading of it, it applies both separately to NOx and DOC. So anything over, whatever it is, 10 tons and 20%. And our interpretation is it should be, under law, a penalty every day it's fired up, even if it's fired up several times and turned off. Enough. And this should apply to vehicles as well, like Volkswagen. And the money has to go. There's $200 million that went out of this $4.3 billion for climate stuff and demonstrations. We're being hidden from the people. And Ron G. George brought this up. We brought this up. It's illegal and it's got to be stopped. And you got to open up the process. This guy Reagan, the head of EPA, said he's for consensus and opening up. You had the sold out, the captured environmental groups. The Sierra Club was involved. And this NRDC, you know, this is garbage. Nobody talked to us. They had a block out of information, purged. That's illegal. We're truth tellers. Like with Ron G. George, we brought up waste, fraud, and abuse. It's illegal to do what you're doing, to shut us up. And this is the real, that money has to go towards seized money for public solar power. The governor in the editorial to the LA Times has said that with the rates doubling, there's going to be a ratepayer revolt. 1 out of 3 poor people and 1 out of 5 of everybody has over $800 arrears in utility bills. They say they got it public power, it's 20% less. The governor has to sub this. They said they were going to do it. PG&E went bankrupt 2 times in this century. And we pay $100 billion each time from water resources to subsidize about enough. We got it. They said there'll be a ratepayer revote. People will stop paying their damn bills. And that's what's up. And other stuff, the stuff about Trump talking, blood and all this. These guys are traitors. They ought to be locked up. They should not be on the ballot of the Republican Party. They do not respect the Constitution, and the 60 cases that said they won, they say they won't accept the election. They didn't accept the last one. The hell with them. They shouldn't be on the ballot.
Stay on topic, please.
Enough.
Thank you. Let's go to any other public comment. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to item 5. I'd like to tee this topic up by just seeing if staff could give us maybe a preview of what we have in store in our November meeting as to topics, and that will inform in part. This item isn't really to get into the weeds as to what 2025 will look like. We'll do that in our November meeting, but did want to note that for November, we'll look forward to an update on this great news, historic in many ways. And you see a handout here about the $500 million grant that was received. So I want to congratulate staff on that. Phenomenal effort. We're not going to have a report on that today, but as it goes before the governing board and other committees to give more formal presentation, we'll bring it back to you all just to be able to have a greater context. But in the meantime, you can at least have this handout on that, and also look on our website for more information. So we'll look forward to great investments toward our mission in the future because of that grant. So staff is to general comments as we look toward November and getting into goals and objectives. Who's going to provide that some initial comments?
I'll go ahead,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you.
So I think Van brought up the progress of items to be addressed in 2024. So for November, the agenda will include an update on state and federal legislative items. It will also include an update on our fiscal year 24-25 budget and work program, and an update on the permit backlog and streamlining efforts, as well as the update on the climate pollution reduction grant that you just spoke about. So that's 4 items for November.
Thank you. Can I ask if we have the Anaheim location functioning? So I think we have one of our board members who've been advisory group members who Vice Mayor Ted Bowie. Do we see that he's on?
He should be able to speak now. He can unmute.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. So I was at the locations in Anaheim, but unfortunately, I guess the gentleman or the person who's hosting at the location is out on emergency. So I could not be at that public location, so I ended up going back to my office.
Okay, so we are in a similar situation, unfortunately, Vice Mayor, that these remote locations don't always work out the way we would like. And in this case, we're not able to access that location, and therefore, regrettably, we can't have you participate other than you. We're grateful that you've been following along and hearing information, but as you may have heard, we do have restrictions on participation by advisory group members when they're not at the physical location. So we'll respectfully put you back on mute, and you can continue to watch the meeting if you wish, and we are grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I do recognize that, and I do recognize the legal advice from the attorney, and I respect that. Just want to inform of the board of the circumstance. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the item, and we had the list on screen just a moment ago. So there's no action today or recommendations per se, only to make mention that we really want you to be thinking about the issues and topics that we want to bring ahead into our first meeting of next year, and make the November meeting as productive as possible to give as much direction as possible in that meeting so that we can get off to a running start and really not be meeting the first part of the year thinking, what are we going to be meeting about? I'd really like to get that front loaded as our last meeting, give clear direction, and then move forward with those items so that we can maximize our time as we go into next year. So as far as that process, that's what I envision. I'm open to any general comments before I open it up to advisory group members. Staff, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this matter? Okay. And as far as advisory group, any questions on the process or general thoughts? Go ahead, Rita.
Yes, I have a couple. Thank you. So on the progress of items to be addressed in 2024, a couple of observations. So on item number 1 on this list for the significant AQMD rule amendments, I wanted to make the committee aware that there's a pretty heavy rule package coming for stationary sources. I had never seen multiple rules being amended at one time. So we have Rule 1107, metal coatings, 1124, aerospace, 1136, wood coatings, 1151, automotive coatings, all being amended. Sometimes the workshop is like 3 and 4 rules at a time. So I think maybe a brief presentation on that would be helpful. The other issue is the follow-up on the status of the letter that this committee sent to the AQMD board. It's my understanding that this morning it was received and filed in admin, and I would really like to understand the process on how that's going to move forward. So if we could have an update on that, that's for the progress of items to be addressed in 2024. Then on the proposed 2025 goals and objectives, I do have a couple of suggestions for thought as we bring it back for action next time. And unfortunately, as you know, David couldn't join us today, but he's been pretty vocal about getting clarification on what specifically is the function of this committee as it stands now. If you look at all the list of items proposed from 1 to 15, they're presentations by staff or some sort of action by staff. The committee is really passive, not taking any action. I thought it was great that we did the letter to the board because that to me is an action from the committee. So it is a tangible accomplishment by the committee. But moving forward, I would like some clarification on the function of the committee. And I think that should be one of our goals, first and foremost, to figure out what does the board want from this committee? If it's feedback from business groups and local government, then we need to establish a process for that. And I'll give an example. Today we were told the quorum is 9, but there's some instances when board members can vote. We had conflicting information on that. I'm not really clear on at what point are the board members active participants in the committee, at what point are they disqualified from voting. So those things I need, I think it would be useful to have clarity on the function and the purpose of the committee. Because if we're just going to receive presentations from staff and not provide any feedback. That's not really the definition of an advisory committee. An advisory committee of an agency is a committee where the agency is actively seeking information from the stakeholders that it's regulating. So that's one item. Then the other item, and it kind of can be combined, because I think there are some policies at the district that don't necessarily benefit air quality, but that are very burdensome on industries. And prime example is something called the QER, quantity emission reports, where these rules that I just mentioned are going to include these reports. And for businesses like ours, we're literally going to have to report zeros every day. But somebody's going to have to pull out a piece of paper and a pen and write down the zero on a form that then it's going to be submitted to the district. And then, you know, if the number is wrong or if somebody made a mistake, there's enforcement action. So I think for me, it would be helpful for this committee to take a position on those type of overall policies that are not generating air quality benefits, but they are a burden on industry. And to Bill's point on Rule 317.1, as far as not sitting on our hands, I wholeheartedly agree. Even whatever the EPA is doing, we need to express to them our discontent from the business community in the South Coast Basin that we do not agree with having to pay fees for a problem that was not generated by the business community in the South Coast Basin. Whatever EPA is going to do, EPA is going to do. I'm not here to represent EPA. I'm here to represent the business community. So I think that should be front and center. And even if it goes nowhere, for at least the committee to express our discontent with policies like 317.1 and move forward in some way, like Bill said, to partner with the district as we did in the past, to at least petition the EPA or send a message to the EPA with our discontent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Appreciate your thoughts on a variety of things. I think as to the scope and mission, I mean, it's clear how many years have you been on the advisory group?
Over 10.
Okay, 10 years. So I don't think we'll be getting into conversations about the function of a group that you've been a part of for 10 years. I think it's been well established. As to our ability to communicate in a way that is informing future meetings in our committees and ultimately the board. Certainly, I think we can look at a manner in which, with staff coordination, that we can effectively ensure that the information is getting to our committees. So we'll take a closer look at that method of communication as we come out of these meetings and how what's happening here can be brought forth to the committees and the board in an appropriate way, and accentuating that need to ensure that when we're meeting here today, we have how many staff members here? 8? We have more staff members and board members here, or advisory group members here today, unfortunately. So all the staff time that's coming into this meeting today, we want to be able to come out of meetings in the future and be able to say, this is what happened, and on this key issue, here's what the advisory group, the sentiment is, and be able to do that in an appropriate manner. So we'll look at that moving forward. So I get you loud and clear on that, and I think certainly there is a way that we can ensure that everyone's feeling good about our meetings here and how we're communicating the sentiment here appropriately to the committees and the board, and I accentuate appropriately in coordination with staff. So we'll look at that moving forward. So message heard loud and clear. As for other topics, we'll look to you all and those who aren't here today with staff's help and letting them know our hope and expectation is we'll come to the table ready to have a discussion as to what our priorities are for topics and get off to a running start next year. Any other comments on this topic? Okay, do I see any hands virtually?
Did Harvey use all of his 3 minutes on the
He
agenda?
did. Any others? Okay. So there's no action other than to encourage you to come with your recommendations in our next meeting. If we don't have any other public comment, then we'll move off of that topic. And one moment. That will bring us to other business. Anything from staff or our advisory group members as far as other business?
Sorry,
Levon?
can I get clarification on the letter that was presented on the AB 617? I think Rita asked if we were going to get a follow-up and what it meant that the letter was received and filed. Is that something that you were asking for
Thank
today?
you. Okay,
or
let's
or
pause for a
the next
moment.
meeting?
I appreciate that. So as staff, you want to highlight the action from admin today pertaining to the letter?
So there was a vote on item before the admin committee. They had the letter before them, and the action was they received the letter and they filed the letter.
And how would that be interpreted then?
I think then it remains there. The letter has been filed. They just accepted the letter. It doesn't go to the governing board.
I wasn't at the meeting. Was there any discussion on the matter?
Not a significant discussion.
There was discussion, Wayne provided some background about AB 617 and the members for CSE meetings. There was discussion amongst the board members. And then the motion was made, I believe, by Supervisor Hagman in regards to receive and file.
As a standalone item, or was it a part of other items?
Standalone item.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the takeaway is no action. That's the takeaway. That is, I'm affirming the takeaway from the receive and file is the admin committee's recommendation was to take no action.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I was part of that administrative committee meeting.
Okay.
They swore in, the chair swore in board member Hagman. So he had some knowledge of it, but if you recall, it was back in, I guess, February of this year when when this subject came up. Rita and I both brought it up, and you initially had tasked me with drafting the letter, and then fast forward to today, we had a number of discussions on the letter, some minor revisions to it, but then we went a number of meeting months where we didn't have a quorum, and in the meantime, CARB had approved their Blueprint 2.0 and the state SIP. But the underlying message here was very clear, is that the CARB and the legislature both want, and Wayne confirmed this during his remarks, want to make sure that the 617 communities, that they have the majority voice on all these community steering committee meetings. And it's no secret that businesses aren't welcome there. Granted, the law says that local businesses may apply and may be seated. The rest of us, they're open to the public, and we have the ability to make public comments. But we don't. Business associations and trade associations don't have a seat at the table. Wayne did say that this might come up again in other years when this blueprint is reviewed again, but that probably won't be for 5 years. I won't be here, and maybe a number of other people won't either. But it just lasted too long, and everybody felt it was a futile thing to pursue it.
Thank you, Bill. I think that at least that helps provide a little more context from the meeting today. Certainly wish when we had the opportunity months ago to move it forward, we didn't have a quorum. So, part of being able to have your voice heard is to try to move swiftly. Sometimes we don't move as swiftly as we wanted. We had an opportunity. We didn't. We don't have quorum today. We didn't have quorum then. Things happen as far as people being unable to make it to meetings. But at the end of the day, the item did move forward, and as was highlighted today, that was the outcome. So, any other questions on that topic? I believe the supervisor also was in a meeting on this topic specifically when it came forward. So certainly well versed on the issue as well. So as far as continuity from meeting to meeting, he was in the meeting, and also it seemed to reportedly made the motion, correct? Okay. Okay, so was there anything else, Rita, that I missed from your comments?
No, thank you. Just to reiterate, there was a lot of frustration and with the process and not really having clarity on how it was going to move forward.
Well, I don't think anyone was more frustrated than me when we had the meeting, we had the item, the letter was there, and we didn't have a quorum to vote on it.
Yeah.
So I think we can all share on that one.
Yeah. And
as far as the process not going forward in a timely manner.
Well, but if you recall, the definition of a quorum changed because, like you said, I've been sitting on this committee for 10 years. I had never heard that board members could not vote on an item. That had never, maybe the fact that we had never voted on an item as a committee was a new event, but I had certainly never heard of that during my tenure. So I look at it as productive, even though it might have been an exercise in futility, because it highlighted a couple of things. How the question of if the committee decides to take a position on something, how is that something going to be moved forward as an advisory committee? And again, there was different information presented. At some point, we were told it's going to go to the board directly. At some point, we were told it was going to go to admin. There was really no clarity in the process, and that's what I'm trying to establish: clarity and consistency moving forward. But I think it was an accomplishment for the committee to actually be able to take action on something. And I actually intend to write an article for our magazine on this very topic and the process. And I do think that it was, if nothing else, it elevates the voice of the local government, small business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. As to the schedule of rules that we'll be considering in the future going into next year. And we're looking at topics for next year. I would like to provide direction and request from staff just to bring back as part of this process where admin ultimately opted to receive and file. If the rules that are being considered for next year, if this group, this advisory group is intent on a similar letter in the future, what's the process in order to do that? Would it be going to admin for each of these rules or another committee? I really want to make sure we are very clear on the process, crystal clear on the process. So we have a rule coming up and we have an advisory group meeting. The advisory group has a comment. They have consensus. My interpretation currently is that any board member that sits on an advisory group would be precluded from that vote, and you would need a advisory group attendance that would have a quorum level of vote absent the board members. So you would have 9 advisory group members, none of which are voting members of a committee or board, that would have to vote in order to move a future letter to the appropriate committee. You can come back and clarify that, or that's my interpretation, unless you have an answer now for me.
So it's based on a charter, and sometimes the things are a little bit in flux because it depends on the number of members on the committee, which may change, and the number of governing board members on the committee, which also may change. And then our concern in terms of having governing board members abstain is when the LGSBA governing board members plus the admin committee members would constitute a quorum of the governing board. So that's the underlying concerns, and sometimes the numbers change depending on the number of members.
So based on our current roster, I just want clarity moving forward, and you can come back maybe. And so I'm not quite putting you on the spot any more than I have right now. Next meeting, just say, okay, so would it always go to admin then if we have, regardless of the future, if we have on the agenda a rule for the consideration that's going to go to a committee or to the board, then I think we just want a crystal clear understanding of it's a combination of board members and admin then, as far as any of those governing board members plus admin. You have to, they would be precluded from the vote at the advisory group.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful to, because this is coming from the charter. And so maybe having a discussion about the charter so everyone can see what the charter says.
I'm not interested in digging up the charter and getting into charter discussions. What I'm interested in, I'm interested in a very clear process in which we know with confidence that we can vote as an advisory group on a rule as far as a recommendation. And so I'm assuming that any voting member on any committee or the board, for that matter, could not comment on that, would be precluded from that vote. So we would have to have every other advisory group member, totaling 9, to be able to, or would it change the, what constituted a quorum? Because you would back them out And so now, so again, I'm just trying to make sure, what's the number? You would need 8, you would need 9, you would
So-
need 7. How many do you
So
need?
right now, currently, there's 17 LGSBA numbers, so 9 is a quorum. The charter says that you need a quorum for a formal recommendation to the admin committee. And in this case, right now, there's 4 governing board members on this advisory group. I believe there's 4 for admin committee. So the concern is 4 plus 4 is 8, which is a quorum, at least a quorum of the governing board members, which is why we asked the advisory group members here to abstain, so that they wouldn't be making a decision as a quorum of the
Okay,
governing board.
that would leave 9.
Yeah, so you would need
Yep,
9.
every one of those other 9 have to be there. And so you see how we have to kind of make sure the attendance is a maximum on those dates. Otherwise, any voting member can't. So that's a bit of a challenge as far as, just from the standpoint of it can be done. But just we just have to know eyes wide open in order to be able to do it. So it's just thank you for clarifying that. Maybe
And just,
that
I
could be
just want to
like minutes or something. We can get that done so we can all I missed it. Well, we got a lot of people missing today, so we can kind of get that.
there's
in writing.
13 non-governing board members of the 17. So you don't need every single person present.
Quick clarification on that. You mentioned,
We should move on because this is not agendized item.
Yeah, it is. I guess other business. So we'll move off of it. My direction is to come back with clarity. I think we clear on what my direction, so we can come back. Okay, great. I think we've handled that, beat that dead horse enough here today. So we'll move on to. I think that's all she wrote, unless staff has anything else.
General public comment period.
Okay. Any other public comment? Thank you. I think he's out of time. What does he get, another 3? Okay, let's do that then. Go ahead, Harvey.
Hello, am I being heard?
Let's go ahead.
Yes? All right. Okay, number 1, you did not call the questions for public comment, and we put *9 on new other business, okay? So we got right separate from this 3-minute thing is garbage. It's illegal, and it should be on every item, and we're going to challenge it. And anything done with that is illegal. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. This woman that spoke, I guess she's from legal, and gave a summary of what happened on this issue about the letter. It was a lie. They said we don't have anything to do with this. We're going to pass it on. And we put in there that 617 communities, Richmond and Oakland, were specifically against it. I guess that's on the record. Okay. Also, what we got here is, okay, I'm incorporating by reference the Harvard Environmental Law Review article from April of this year about charging the fossil fuel companies with causing and covering up climate change, civil and criminal homicide for distorting the record and covering up for at least 50, 60 years. It's twice that, actually. Okay, it's been referred by Congress to justice. And it has in there also all the stuff y'all did with natural gas. It's a dodge to keep solar down, and there's a 65-page report and 3 years of comments in the Oversight and Budget Committee. We incorporate that all by reference in the record here, okay? It says there's more murders here than all murders in the history of the United States. Enough. And it has captured agencies. This is the captured agency, this industry, these small businesses. What this guy comes from Edison, all right? This guy comes from Edison, and that's what's up. And there is a Solar Energy Industries Association. We work with them. We had them come 40, 30 years ago to testify about pool heaters and stuff. We're going to bring them again. Enough of this stuff. And we want the right of first refusal for worker-owned co-ops. We had co-ops in the 1880s, the farm owners against the railroads. We had in the 30s, the electric co-ops that the government started. That 80% of the country's got this in the middle of the country, all right? Solar power, public power is 20% less. That's the way you deal with equity and all this stuff. We want worker-controlled and worker-owned co-ops to do this with labor in the community and the 617 and all this, and it's got to be brought up now. And the right of first refusal also, and establishing equity through housing and buying businesses, and incorporating the study we did with the PUC 45 years ago with Commissioner Glenn, the first black commissioner's family started what glory was about, the 54th. All right, this is history. All right, enough. This stuff was never evaluated. We talked about solar theory of value based there on leveraging and coordinating vertically and horizontally the industry and the solar renewables and the transition. We do not get to talk. We've been around here 30, 40 years, not just 10 years, and we're limited to this stuff. This is outrageous. It's going to stop right now. Bye. And we do not have a right to ask comments. Comments don't ask questions.
Do we have any other comment for the day? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and I'm going to just take a moment of civility after that and say how much I appreciate the advisory group members being here today. I appreciate staff. Wish you guys a great rest of the day and a great weekend. That will conclude our meeting for the day, and our next meeting date will be November 8th, 2024 at 11:30. Thanks, everyone, and God bless.